The Lindisfarne raid, the Viking attack on the island of Lindisfarne, Holy Island, on the coast of present-day Northumberland in 793. The monastery at Lindisfarne was the leading center of Christianity in the kingdom of Northumbria. This event caused shockwaves in English Christianity and marked the beginning of the Viking Age in Europe. At the end of the 8th century, the raid on Lindisfarne was not the first Viking attack on the British Isles. In a record dated 787, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle reports the arrival of 3 ships of Northmen on the coast of Wessex. When a local reeve came to bring them to the king, they immediately killed him. Additionally, a Kent charter dated 792 states that defensive measures were being taken against pagan seafarers in the kingdom of Mercia. However, the attack on Lindisfarne in 793 was the first recorded Viking raid in England and more broadly in Europe, and its significance is demonstrated by the strange events that accompanied it in the historical records. The events of the year are described in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle as follows. Terrible omens came over the land of Northumbria and frightened the people greatly. These were incredible lightning and storms, and fiery dragons were flying in the sky. Shortly after these signs a great famine began, and not long after in the same year, on around the 6th day of January, the merciless attacks of pagan men devastated the Church of God on the island of Lindisfarne with violent plundering and slaughter. Although the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle states that the raid took place in January, it is now generally accepted that the actual date was June 8th. Given the testimonies of other sources and the fact that spring is a more favorable season for coastal raids, the given date is likely a scribal error. The attack itself is described briefly. The chronicler merely states that the church was destroyed, goods were stolen, and blood was shed. But the famine and the striking signs seen beforehand demonstrate the gravity of the raid from an Anglo-Saxon perspective. The event is recounted in detail in many other medieval sources, including the 12th century chronicle Historia Regum, History of Kings, generally attributed to Simeon of Durham. The author claims that the pagan invaders laid everything waste with heavy plundering, trampled the holy places with unclean feet, dug up the altars, and seized all the treasures of the Holy Church. He goes on to recount that they dragged many of the monastery's brethren away in chains and drowned some of them in the sea. The raid is also addressed by the Northumbrian scholar Alcuin, who was living in the Frankish kingdom and teaching Charlemagne's children at the time. In letters written to both the King of Northumbria and the Bishop of Lindisfarne, Alcuin regards the event as an unprecedented catastrophe. He recounts that the church was splattered with the blood of the priests of God, stripped of all its ornaments, and that the pagan perpetrators trampled the bodies of the saints in God's temple like dung in the street. The sources show that this event was terrifying to English Christians not only because of the great violence inflicted, but also because a Christian holy site had been desecrated by a pagan people. In Alcuin's letters and in the Historia Regum, the raid is portrayed above all as a desecration, a violation of a sacred place. Indeed, the Vikings who attacked the island of Lindisfarne were attacking the very heart of Anglo-Saxon Christianity. The monastery and bishopric on Lindisfarne had been founded in the mid-7th century by Aidan, an Irish monk summoned to Northumbria by King Oswald to revive the Christian mission in the north. Lindisfarne became the center of a remarkably successful conversion mission, from which Aidan went to the mainland to teach the Christian faith and establish new missionary outposts. The island later became a place of pilgrimage because it held the remains of Saint Cuthbert, who was appointed Bishop of Lindisfarne in 685. Cuthbert was a renowned prophet and healer in his time, and after his death many miracles were reported at the site of his shrine, making the island a popular destination for believers. As the monastery grew in importance, it also grew in power and wealth, receiving gifts and land grants from royal figures. At the time of the raid, it housed numerous precious liturgical objects. What made the raid such a crisis was the importance of Lindisfarne to Christians. For Alcuin, the fact that a pagan people had successfully destroyed such a place, which should have been under the protection of a saint, required some explanation. In his letters, he concludes that the sinfulness of the people must be the reason God did not protect them, though he makes no specific accusation. A few years earlier, the king of Northumbria, Ælfwald, had been killed by a conspiracy group led by the nobleman Sigga. Sigga had committed suicide in February of the same year as the Viking raid. Thus the kingdom's recent history included regicide and suicide, and it is possible that Alcuin was alluding to these events when imagining the attack as divine retribution. The raid on the monastery of Lindisfarne is frequently cited as the beginning of the Viking Age in Europe. The Vikings immediately afterwards attacked many other monasteries in the British Isles, including the monastery of Jarrow, also in Northumbria, and the famous monastery of Iona in the Hebrides. Monasteries were easy targets for raiders because they were isolated and defenseless, and they were often filled with material wealth. These first attackers were most likely Norwegians coming directly across the North Sea, and the attacks they launched were brief hit-and-run affairs. However, by the middle of the 9th century, Viking armies, by then mostly Danish, had begun conquering entire kingdoms in England. Scandinavian armies also spread across the European continent, from Francia to Russia, raiding and seeking new settlements. The Viking Age in Europe did not come to an end until the mid-11th century.
If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you in the new video.